start with a question. How many of you think crypto assets are here to stay beyond the next 5 years? Okay, so pretty much all of you, we're in a crypto conference, so that's predictable. But what needs to happen so that crypto assets will be here to stay? What needs to happen in order for the crypto market to be a viable market? Institutionalization. Without institutional investors, without the big players getting into this scene, to the crypto market, we're not going to see crypto market existing for long, not in a big way anyway. And the thing is that we're so obsessed about security tokens, right? We keep talking about security tokens, but security tokens will have no place to live without the infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mean exchanges, custodians, broker-dealers that can sell tokens, crowdfunding platforms, investment pools. All of those will need to be in place as the cornerstones of the crypto market, if crypto market is here to stay. And regulation is a big part of it. And what we want to discuss today is about that, not about, again, security tokens, which is nice, we've ground it up, from all possible directions. We're going to talk about the infrastructure players, the exchanges, the custodians, the broker-dealers, the crowdfunding platforms. Where are they in terms of the regulation? Will existing regulation be enough, or do we actually need new regulation? Maybe we don't need to invent the wheel. Maybe, as Isaac said, blockchain is just a tool, right? We're not really inventing a whole new sphere, or are we? So we're going to discuss that in our beautiful panel. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Avia. I'm a blockchain lawyer and regulation advisor. I'm based in Tel Aviv, advising clients worldwide, working with crypto and blockchain entrepreneurs and investors. Ralph, go ahead.
My name is Ralph Liu. I'm the founder and CEO for MuChain. I myself is the investment banker. So my profession is helping other people to raise money. But I do have two of our own projects. So I'd like to give you a little bit of introduction about it. The MuChain is actually something different from my background. And what happened was, last Christmas, so I was in the Christmas party and in my office building. Now, in the cocktail party, what do you talk about these days? You trade crypto. So I met this fellow, and then he said, hey, he just bought some Ether today. I asked him, do you understand, what is the technology behind all the cryptocurrency? That's called blockchain. So blockchain can disrupt every single industry. So then I asked him, what do you do? He said, I was a mover. I'm a mover. So then I spent the whole evening explaining to him how blockchain can change your life. That night when I drove home, the whole idea about blockchain came about. Now, what is MuChain? Anybody who traveled here from a different city, can you raise your hand? Let's see you. Where did you come from?
London.
London.
Yeah.
So let's say you already own the MuChain's token, MCX, and then you're already a member of the platform. Now, before you came to Tel Aviv, last week, somebody's gonna ask you, they say, can you bring this jacket to my daughter? She's studying the university in Tel Aviv. If you do, I'll pay you $100. Once you agree, you're gonna be the mule on the MuChain platform.
But I wouldn't agree to doing that.
It's your choice. It's peer-to-peer. It's a free market. But if you take it, you get 20% of your ticket subsidized.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you're only supposed to, if you're traveling between one destination and another destination, you're only supposed to take stuff that you're carrying. They asked you that at the airport.
Yeah, okay, so this idea is called the Convenience Assistance Service.
Right.
So the sender, if they don't use your service, they have to use a UPS or FedEx. They'll burn a lot of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
But if they use you, everybody in our daily life, you have a lot of extra resources in terms of time and space.
I think we need to cut short here because we're not going to have time for the panel.
We have to get to that part.
Yeah.
So let me lead to the second part. We'll talk more about that very quickly. The MuChain is a startup, so we need to build a platform. So we ended up with a technology company in China Now we found out, this is a blockchain company. They own the payment system. So what we ended up is like WeChat. You can use a QR code to scan. So these are another second part of the business that we're working on. Now later on, I understand. I'll explain a little bit more about how we do the financing in the U.S.
Yes, hello everybody. I think for most of you it's the last conference of the year, so first of all I wish you Merry Xmas and a Happy New Year after this conference. But before we go in for that, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Guido Schmitz-Komacher. I'm living in Switzerland. I've been now already in about 30 blockchain projects in the board, so I could not advertise for all of them. Actually, I'm with Bancorp, Trustee Saga. I'm consulting on a bank, converting EU to a crypto bank, so a couple of projects, and the rest about regulatory I'm coming up to the discussion.
Hi everyone, James Mskazapati from Malta. I'm a lawyer, law firm, commercial law firm doing traditionally regulatory, asset management, securities, and the last few years we're doing a lot of blockchain related work, especially since Malta's new regulation, which we'll probably discuss at some point.
Hi, my name is Greg Langman. I'm based out of Toronto, and our project is based out of Toronto as well. I just want to say thank you for the beautiful organizers of this conference, to the beautiful lawyers as well. Lawyer. Our project called Digimax .global. We're a global security compliant platform, and as a classical IPO, we're going to be listed this month in Canadian Securities Exchange, and we basically focus on raising funds for STO projects.
Amazing. So my first question for you is, what do you think is the most pressing issue right now for regulators and for the growth of the market? Regulating token sales and ICOs, as some countries are doing, or actually enforcing existing regulations / new regulations on the infrastructure players, exchanges, custodians, brokers, and investment pools, crowdfunding platforms? Yeah, Ralph, I see that you are aching to answer.
I'll volunteer to be the first one. So basically what went on in 2017 in terms of ICO is basically a tokenized crowdfunding. But in the US, it started 5-6 years ago. By now, the crowdfunding is already mature. You have Reg CF, regulation crowdfunding. You can raise up to 1 million. Then you have Reg D and Reg S. That's a private placement. It's unlimited how much you can raise, but you can only raise it from accredited investors. Then you've got the Reg A plus. You can raise up to 50 million.
Meaning IPO.
Everybody, yes. So now you're talking about ICO, it's basically just tokenizing. Yeah. Now going forward, to answer your questions, it's really how to come up with a new scheme. How are you going to bring the ICO to be under regulation? Again, people keep talking about they want to protect investors. In reality, I think it's more to protect the issuer. Because we could have sitting on 50 million by now, but as an investment banker, we canceled our ICO back in March this year.
So you're basically circling back to the new regulation / enforcement of existing regulation question, which is also a big question. Whether we really need specific regulations for this new fundraising vehicle, or can we just enforce existing regulations?
Yeah, let me just add one sentence before I pass on. Because if you raise the money under the regulation, as a sponsor, as an issuer, you protected it. But if you raise the money through ICO without regulation, all it takes just one disgruntled investors. They can bring that to the security regulator, or they can initiate a class action lawsuit. But if you follow the regulation, you're protected in that way.
I like always to provocate a little bit. I would say, first of all, I like the regulators, they're my friends, and also like the lawyers, they're also my friends. But according to regulation, I've seen now in a couple couple of conferences, everybody's talking about and scared about regulation. I would encourage ourselves a little bit, because we are a decentralized ecosystem, and our strategy in legal should be a decentralized one. Some of the lawyers, not the ones here on the panel, told me it's not possible. I said, yes, it's possible, because also the regulators, as my friends, they have to do a job, and they are not finished their job yet. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the environment, and you could do a lot of things. I could register a company for you with for security tokens in Liechtenstein and become a utility token status, and you're fine with it. But this is not the future. This is not what we are aiming for. We have to do some regulation in the blockchain ecosystem, together with the regulators, together with good law firms. But this will come up during the next years, and we don't have a proven law yet where we can really rely on. So we should take our blockchain projects, release ourselves a little bit the fear of blockchain, of regulatory, and try to find a decentralized structure. Meaning, if I need an exchange or have any contact to an exchange, then I go to Estonia, get an exchange license and a wallet license, and put this part of my project under this regulation. If I need an SRO license, I can go to Switzerland and get one. If I need no license, I don't need anyone, and I cannot cover 210 countries worldwide on regulation. Then I'm stuck. I have 20 lawyers in my board sitting, and my project is dead. And this is a problem which is also maybe seen in some of the courses of and the whole blockchain ecosystem. So release ourselves and fit a strategy according to regulatory and legal, which fits to your project, and not paying too much money and effort on things where even the regulators don't know how to treat it during the next 2 years.
Another thing, also, cross-border existed before blockchain. I mean, we had, internet has been in existence for quite some time now, and cross-border online businesses exist. So again, this brings me back to the fact that, okay, this is disruption, but it's not completely new, and we can totally live with what we have right now to adjust to the blockchain infrastructure. But James, Malta.
We have to keep in mind that we're very, very early in the industry. We're in 1999, I submitted my doctorate thesis on taxation of electronic commerce, which is exactly what you mentioned. At the time, electronic commerce was something totally new. Today it's difficult to probably remember that, but people were asking, you had lawyers asking, what do you mean you can send a song online to someone else? It was inconceivable. And then you had the US and Europe and other entities, other jurisdictions trying to understand how to regulate, how to tax, coming up with some ideas that were frankly unworkable and stupid. At that stage, just to give you one example, the US wanted to tax according to the amount of information being sent. So if I send you the source code for Microsoft, I'm going to pay less than if I send you a photo of my puppy. You know what I mean? It's unworkable. Today we're maybe slightly more advanced in blockchain, but we're still very, very early. We've got a situation where the US is taking one approach. We can't speak about Europe because there's no Europe-wide approach.
Well, but there are, you have MiFID, you can get a license to become an exchange, you can trade securities, you can be a broker, you can be a custodian. All of these exist in Europe, and even in a good way, because you can passport it from country to country.
The only real passport you can have in Europe is, yes, under the Prospectus Directive, effectively, but that's just for STOs.
But also MiFID.
Types of it, yes. But with any other token, with blockchain technology, we're still really, really far away. As we know, in some countries, obviously Malta, Gibraltar, Estonia, to a lesser extent, and we still need to see how that's going. But what we're seeing as well is that the US and the EU are taking a very different view. Whether we need regulation, yes, absolutely we need regulation. We have to keep the basics in mind. That why is regulation? The regulation there is there to protect investors who are normally non-sophisticated investors, and to protect against money laundering and terrorist financing. So we can't do without that.
Greg, what do you say about Canada?
Just want to say that we definitely need regulations. We're dealing with, for example, OSC, and it's more flexible Ontario Security Commission than SEC. But we follow SEC. I think there are so many. I agree with my colleagues. It's too early stage and stuff like that. But I think there are so many projects now. They call themselves, for example, ICO. Then they convert immediately to STO, and they just they say that they're STO, right? And they don't even know how to manage it, how to prove it, and so. I think, the regulation should be more strict on the issuers, and I would say this is the future.
Okay. Well, we had an interesting discussion. It wasn't the question, but let's move on. So, out of the infrastructure players, right? We have custodians, we have exchanges, we have crowdfunding platforms. Which one do you think is the most pressing right now to enforce? Which, you could call them kind of gatekeepers, right? Because the exchange is a gatekeeper, because that's the way, if I have $100 today and I want to get into crypto, I need to go through an exchange. So that's a gatekeeper, which is very important from an anti-money laundering perspective. But which vertical do you see as the most crucial right now in terms of proper regulation?
Well, I can talk about what's the situation in the US, because first of all, let's take a look at the token business. So if you want to categorize them, there are 3 types of functions. The first one, that's a payment token, right? So that's Bitcoin, or to a certain degree, Ether. Now, these are, people used to call it, infrastructure. The second type is a utility token. Again, you got platform token and the application token. The third type, that's asset token, to link up with the real world real estate and any physical the properties. Now, in the US context, outside of payment currency or payment token, both utility token and asset token are considered securities.
But besides the tokens, let's talk about the infrastructure players, right? We have the exchanges, the custodians, the crowdfunding platforms. Mm-hmm. Let's leave the tokens aside for a minute because I want to talk about, regulating the edges. And what out of those, which one do you see as the most important right now? I think, maybe you could.
All right, let me just finish off that part though. So I would answer your question as far as regulation. How are you going to conduct the selling of any token to investors? That process is called security selling. So even the STO, in my opinion, that's a misnomer. There's no such thing as a security token. Securities is really just a term invented by the regulator. You have to follow the regulator's way to raise money from investors. So in terms of answering your question, the vertical, that's how you sell it. No matter what you sell, you're getting money from the investor. You have to follow the rule as a security.
No, but I think, Guido, maybe you could shed some light because, the function of an exchange is very different from the function of a custodian, for example, or a fund. So, what do you think?
But I think I have to come from the other end. All the people who are sitting in this room have invested maybe in cryptocurrencies, and they are not investing more because at the moment they have no money. The investors are not investing because they see teams, but they don't see results. They don't see applications. And the people who could invest next to investors and next to the nerds, which is our community here, are the normal people. And they cannot do it because the technical structure is missing. It's complicated. A lot of rumors are coming up and the cost is going down, so everybody is scared. So we have now to come up on infrastructure, first of all, to give them applications which they can use, where they see something which is sustainable, by what they can do something with it. And then the investors and the others come from. Then, in my opinion, we just have to find the right path. And there are exchanges, the decentralized, the centralized exchanges, and a lot of different approaches will lead to this goal. But this goal must be in our head first, before we talk about regulation, before we talk about which is now the right path there.
But the problem is that you don't actually have decentralization yet. I mean, we're all building on this decentralized technology, but the market is operating in a very centralized way. You don't have any decentralized exchanges with liquidity or with a good enough user experience. So this is what we have to work with today, with the centralization of the decentralized infrastructure.
Exactly. I need. It's 1 year ago. I was sitting with my friends for a new year, and then they said, "Oh, I would like to invest in crypto." And I said, "Okay, then let's install a wallet and do the transactions and prepare everything." But they're already there. At that time, it was a lot of things you have to do and you don't have in mind. And this is exactly what I think. For example, if you take Bangkok, but I don't want to talk about single project too much, they try to make a very easy access to their platform. Yeah? And this is something which can be understood quite easy, because it's close to the e-banking, the old one. You get a code and everything on it. And this is our problem. Yeah? This is a problem that we, first of all, have this access. But even if I give it access, there's no story behind. I have technology projects who have not delivered. I have applications waiting for the right blockchain or not even there. I've seen a lot of genius, brilliant ideas stuck in the pre-ICO because there's nobody now investing in the ICO. So this is our traffic jam we have on the blockchain, which we have to solve now and where we have to work on. And so I would like to encourage also projects that we could work together on education, on bringing blockchain ideas and the idea why blockchain makes sense to people that they say, cool, I go for it. And so I like also in things where projects go out and say, I give for free a few tokens to everybody to just attract them to look behind the wall.
James, what do you think?
To try and answer your questions directly as possible, you're asking about possibly a hierarchy of importance between. I don't think we need to really reinvent the wheel. We have to look at traditional regulation and traditional approaches. So your traditional approach is when you have different classes of license, take investment services license, your lightest one is not just giving investment advice. Typically your class 4 in Europe, what is called a class 4 in Europe, is custody, an exchange, a depository, where I am actually controlling clients' funds. So I think that approach has worked, and I would recommend going exactly down that. I don't know if that answers what you.
That's also Malta's approach in virtual financial assets regulation. They divided
we
into classes.
word for word,
Yeah.
the Investment Services Act, and obviously MiFID.
Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I'm not sure if I'm correctly understanding the question because everybody's speaking about everything. Right, but I think exchanges it's a front line, and they probably will get more like, for example, SEC will get higher of that on the front line on the exchanges. But everything else is important as well, custodians and KYCs and anti-money laundering and stuff like that. So
There was just the G20 countries. They decided to regulate cryptocurrencies from an AML perspective. So that's interesting. Now we're not talking about most of the world yet, but a G20 level cooperation, even from the AML perspective, is also something that will shed some light on how an exchange should behave when depositing a new client, etc. I just saw Malta's Prime Minister in Basel recently, and he was talking about tech-neutral regulation. He was talking about how a regulator has to try and stay technologically neutral and regulate the actual use cases and not the technology. But do you think that with the uniqueness of blockchain, is that feasible?
That's a good question. Today is difficult to answer. If you ask me today, I'd say yes, but something could technologically change in the next couple of years, which no one here can predict. And that is precisely the aim behind technology neutral legislation. I think it's a sensible approach. I don't think you can take any other approach. We've seen this in online gaming. We did this in 2004. We went through a very innovative, online gaming regime, and it was totally technologically neutral in the sense that it's up to you to go to the authority and to explain what you're doing technologically. But the law is not going to impose anything from that side. In our law, the only technological definition is that you have to be based, to fall under the law, it's just the DLT. So ultimately it's just the DLT, and then it's very wide, definition is very, very wide. Permissionless, public, private, it's really, really wide. So as long as you're in some way on DLT technology, you fall under the law.
even blockchain is not really just one blockchain anymore, because you have so many different consensus algorithms, so you have so many different variables of blockchain networks. So yeah, I mean, you know.
I'm pretty sure that myself as a blockchain enthusiast, I'm really fighting for that we have a proper KYC AML documented access to this technology, because we don't want to be the darknet, we don't want to be the net for the criminals when we cannot succeed. The question here is now, because we have a transparent net where you can see every blockchain transaction, if really everybody wants to have his personal data be published there as well. And this is not working. And there is, I think, the main point we have to solve with the regulatory authorities to say, we need an approval, KYC, AML approval, but in a way documented in a blockchain, so that not everybody can see who is behind it, but that everybody can see this is a trusted partner. This is a partner who was checked and who can open a wallet and have a wallet. And there, I think, is a discussion we have to do with the regulators, and this will take some time. And in between, we have to work on other solutions where we voluntarily document it, but even if it's not approved by all regulatory authorities, but that we can show up, we do our homework, and we do a proper job.
Yeah, Ralph.
Okay, so again, you know, I can offer a little bit of experience as far as how to bring the ICO under the regulation and to conduct a compliant ICO. So the challenge is really, how do you use the tokens, become a tokenized company, going through the security selling process. One of the shortcuts, let me just explain this to you. You can continue to issue equity, but you don't have to issue common equity. You can issue a preferred share. Then you can give away the tokens as a perk, all right? So this could be a feasible way, but to answer your question in terms of the KYC, the process, let's say from the issuer perspective, we have all experience. So conventionally, if I had gone ahead with ICO, nobody even checked who I am, you know? But when we went through the whole normal security offering process, there are layer and layer of checking of your background, criminal record, you know, even your credit background, everything. So that's from an issuer perspective. Now, in terms of from the investor perspective, that's a big challenge. Because we're offering the security process, the preferred share, now the traditional ICO, you've got people with $50, $100 worth of a cryptocurrency. 90% of those people on the Telegram channel, you know, they don't qualify. They won't be your investors if you go through the security selling process.
But there is one issue here. You know, I keep thinking about how the whole ICO thing was meant to disrupt the normal, you know, VC model, the fundraising model. It was meant to be a disruptive fundraising model. And, you know, on the one hand, I'm saying, okay, we're not inventing the wheel and there are existing regulations, but the problem is that the existing regulations are sort of raping this revolutionary fundraising vehicle into the same structures that we know. And instead of being disruptive, we're just fitting into the same old patterns again. So where do you see possible solutions here, Greg? I think you may.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Just want to say a little bit that, for example, AML, I think it's more for like the terrorist kind of protection thing, and this type of thing. KYC maybe it's more useful for, you know, in our environment, but AML is kind of, I think.
Dirty money is very common in
right,
Guatemala.
Right, but for
I can bring you to my hometown and you can see.
But for the issuers, I think it's kind of, to me, it's, I think it's not the right path. It's not the right thing for the issuers to basically go through this process. Like, to me, it's more like, you know, for other things. So, but I agree with you. You said that it's, we're coming back to the traditional things, you know, like it's not, we're not like it's been invented like a new way of you know, raising funds and stuff like that through ICO process, but now we're coming back to the traditional things. And
I think I don't think that the disruptive energy of an ICO is depending on KYC and AML at least. If you are making your ICO only on crypto, then at least it's, in my opinion, in a separated ecosystem. The only problem is as long as you are coming up really with the fiat world in connection, meaning with banks providing your bank account, regulatories in a country. So if you are deploying your project in a country, then for sure they want to have KYC and AML. But this is in an ICO more a single event. So you're contributing once and have to document who are you, so that you cannot do it unknown. But this stays within the project. The major problem is not this KYC AML documentation, because this is a standard one and still everybody can contribute on the project. The problem comes afterwards if you have exchange, if you have a wallet, and that any transaction has to be, if it's a new wallet, supported by a new KYC AML. And there is a point where you have to find with regulatory bodies somewhere on the world a kind of solution that they accept that we have not to do it any time and document in every change itself. And this is my opinion, to say, hey, let's do a KYC documentation in our own technology, and we have solutions working on this to document it in a blockchain, and then to work with this, because otherwise we're losing the people in the ecosystem, because they say, no, this is a little bit too much. If for any wallet have to do a video approval and stuff like this.
But there's another thing that, the crypto market started from retail and then moved on to the divas, to the institutional investors, which is funny because it started as a Wild West, market. Retail investors don't care, don't have any demands, just want to, pump their money into exchanges and ICOs. And today, the institutional investors, the serious people, are getting into this market, and they demand, not only the banks demand that the businesses in this field be compliant, they demand that as well. So that's another thing, that it's coming from the crowd and not only from the banks and the fiat infrastructure.
What you described was spot on. ICO started as this, disruptive element, but the nature has changed, probably because of the way that regulators look at it. So it started out as, I would describe it from the legal point of view, as pure crowdfunding, classic crowdfunding. Getting together a very small amount for a large number of people without any ownership or whatever. But what we have to keep in mind is that I speak at least about the US and the EU, look at securities in a very different manner, and that's probably what happened. US, you have the Howard test, so it's, if you in any way look like a security, you're a security. In Europe, we take a totally different approach. MiFID, transferable securities, so that the actual operative term is transferability. Ownership doesn't come into it. If it's transferable, then you have to fall under it.
Plus, they don't care what you were thinking when you bought, like the Howey test. One of the clauses in the Howey test is your intention. If you came into it in order to make profit, but in Europe you don't have this mental element, so that's also very restrictive.
Howey test is 1946, so it's about time.
Yeah, definitely. So, do we have more time? Yes. So I'm going to move on to another question. Ralph was talking about, ways to give equity. I'm wondering today how. I'm saying that all of the investors, they want equity today. All the investors that I know, they're looking for equity in the companies, which again is very depressing, because again we are abandoning the disruption and fitting into the same VC, PE, angel investor model. What do you think that market players can do today in order to restore investors' trust and willingness to buy tokens, not only for equity, but also just to be, token holders and get maybe dividends of the company's profits?
Okay, so basically the invention of the new economic value provided by tokenization is, for the first time, you can actually combine your potential customer together with your investors. Now, having been in the investment banking field all my career, in the earlier days, that will be a wild, wild dream for all investment bankers. How can you convince all your consumers to buy your stock? We have seen some of the experiments in the past, but nothing really worked until, out of the blue, technology introduced new concepts called tokens, and then by nature, you're combining your customer with your investors. So this is not by design by any economic gurus. It's brought to the market, to the world by the technology. So now, if you say right now the tokenization is not doable, you're literally just throwing away the new economic value invented by tokenization. Now, to answer your question, how do we do it? So you have to really just go through, because the existing regulation, they don't understand this. They didn't exist. They don't have a proper way to do it. Therefore, in order to comply with the security selling process, you have to rely on the equity. So the quickest way, the shortcut, is basically just issuing a preferred share instead of common share. You know why? Because if you issue common share, if you still want to issue token, you will create problems because there are conflicts. Tokens by nature is your equity, although you can use your token for your services. So therefore, if some of the company, even during 2017, we have observed some of the company, they really didn't know what they were doing. They issued the security with the angel investor, with the VC. Then, lo and behold, they're going to issue their token. You come to think of it, what's going to happen in the future? Who's going to get your appreciation, the equity or your token? So therefore, the latest way is really just to issue a preferred share. Preferred share is just a form of debt. Then you leave all the token, the appreciation potential to your tokens.
That's interesting because, I was just at Slush and I saw this company, he was giving a keynote speech, the founder, and he was talking about how they turned all the employees of the company into stakeholders, into shareholders. And that's a big trend today. You also, that was the initial spirit of the DAO and the DAX today, to turn basically all of the players, everyone that has anything to do with your company or your community, into a stakeholder. So I think that might be a possible path for.
I'm looking a little bit out of the normal person who buys a token of a project. If I would know that the investor has not taken tokens, that he has taken shares, then I would ask myself, is he not he who did the due diligence on the project, who looked behind it, if he not believing to the project, or is he just not understanding it? So in my opinion, it would look also not very good. So out of the view of the investor, and I've done a lot of accompanied a lot of investments in the old world with VCs and business angels, I would always try to convince my investor and say, if you're not giving by your contribution a strong signal to the token, then you're shooting yourself in your leg.
Put your money where your mouth is. James, what do you think?
With all due respect on the last point, I'm not really seeing that because we come from a traditional background, investment background, so your VCs and PEs. And what we're seeing actually at the moment is when institutional investors come in, they're not interested in tokens. They're big enough to come in and dictate terms. If they like the project, they're going to say, I want equity. But they are putting their money where their mouth is, in the sense that they are putting money into the project. We also have to distinguish between different stages. If I'm coming in at seed, which is becoming very rare now among institutional investors, I need an MVP, I need a minimum viable product, always. But if you've shown me your minimum viable product and I really like it, my question is, and this is, as I'm saying, I'm seeing it on a daily basis, my question as an institutional investor is, so you want my money but you don't give me equity? No, that's not going to work. Yeah. And the reality is, now this might sound cynical, is against the spirit of, but this is reality. Reality is that money talks, ultimately.
But basically we can say that tokens are for retail and institutional will continue being the equity partners, which makes sense. But the only detriment to that today is regulation, because today you have no convenient way to raise a sufficient amount of funds from the public You have to be, have to approve your prospectus with the securities regulator. But Greg, you have, Digimax, which is a platform for security tokens, and you're looking for partnerships worldwide, right, with local broker dealers. So that's actually an amazing growth engine for retail to take part in this space.
Yeah, and I just want to say that we're experiencing now this time the transformation of the utility tokens into the security tokens, and this is maybe the way the right way to see how the institutional investors would react. So they basically, they're going to be more protected anyway at this point, and that's what we are basically trying to do, is helping projects going to STO and raising funds for them through the institutionals. So I think that's one of to answer your question, that's the way maybe to make the projects more like a solid projects, right? So for example, if it's already an existing company and generating revenues, and even if it's a publicly listed company, they still have an opportunity to collect on the crowdfunding and do STO as well, right? So I think that's the way to go.
Now I have to take you where you said the disruptive energy is now missing. If I take now a final of this panel, of this conference today, maybe also the last conferences, the courses are down, the investors are staying in their old approach, the mass outside is not accepting us, and we are sitting here and say, oh shit, what is now coming up? Now we can close out the whole blockchain setup in a bit, to be a little bit black and white, and now we have to say, do we really want this? Here are sitting a lot of entrepreneurs in this panel. So we have to think about to turn around something here. We all believed in blockchain, we all believed in the potential here. And now we let it go because some regulators have their opinion, because some crowd exchanges have not the right access, some investors are not believing in the new model with their old models. We have maybe some lawyers outside of this panel who are also making a lot of problems somewhere. We have to turn something around, in our mind. We have to find out. I met some PR guys here today and marketing guys. It's also your contribution to find new ideas, that we are going out and reach the people, that we are getting our idea over on board. And this is a statement, sorry to bring it in this panel, but this was alarming me when I was now observing the whole discussion, to say, here we have to do something.
So I think it's questions time?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Anyone has a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think here. You don't need a mic, I think you can just...
Yeah, that's all right. I'm quite loud. It's Mark Durrant from Bloomberg. I think it's great, but there's still a vast chasm between where we currently are and where we need to be to reach institutional investors. Because we're doing our best at Bloomberg. I'm trying to move gradually as well, and I'm grateful to everybody in Malta as well for starting the process of at least having some EU regulation. I personally would have loved to have taken as much money as possible last year, but nothing was regulated. You didn't know if you were looking at an ICO, which was okay, or a former binary options person that was just a complete scam. So tell me, how are we going to get to the point where there is regulatory parity with the real world finance, people in the city, people in Wall Street?
I think that if speaking about Malta today, we do have parity from a legal point of view. Totally. Parity to the point that, as I said before, our blockchain-related regulation is word for word investment services. If you're a security token, you don't even fall under virtual financial assets regulation. You fall under BFIT, which is exactly the same, and you fall under the European Prospectus Directive. So my issue of a security and selling that to the public of a share, or issuing a security token, is exactly the same regulation. And this is true across Europe. So all European countries fall under MiFID, so it's true across Europe. What we have to see, and a question that will be answered over the next few years, is what about national regulators? So today, the Maltese regulator is obviously familiar with, it wants to go ahead with security tokens, so if I submit a prospectus, they will look at that and subject to everything being okay, they will accept it. What's going to happen if I go to Spain, if I go to Italy, and submit under the prospectus directive, which is going to be changed by prospectus regulation next year, a security token offering? How are they going to react? I honestly don't know, and I'm really curious. Technically, they should.
There was Walter today from Austria here in one of the panels that said how they got a prospectus approved with the Austrian financial regulator. So that's kind of cool. But also, I think
Austria is really forward-looking.
yeah, well,
Austria is one thing. Try France is surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, but try Italy, Spain. We'll see.
Try the FCA.
I would much prefer dealing with FCA than dealing with a more continental approach.
but you know, and also you have, when it comes to exchanges, for example, I think nothing's different, right? You can get a financial institution license, you can get a multi-trading facility license, you can get, in the US, the ATS, like some companies are doing right now. So I think that's not really as bad as we think. It is hard to get those licenses, but that's a good thing, because we don't want anyone, just any company, to be able to trade securities freely on their exchange. And I think that's the regulatory parity that you're talking about. That's, for me, the most important thing, is that we have enough exchanges that are licensed to trade securities, that we have enough broker-dealers that are into crypto assets, and then I think that institutional investors will come in a big way.
Any more questions? No? Okay, I understand. Thank you for this amazing panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.